Hello, I'm Debbie Bell-Hosking for FinextraTV, and I'm joined by Yogesh Patel, CTO and Chief Data Scientist at Outseer, and we're talking about AI strategies when it comes to fraud prevention and in particular scams. Yogesh, welcome to our studio.
Hi Debbie, it's great to be here.
And of course, we've already had somebody from Outseer in our studio, your CEO, John Filby.
Yes.
And when we spoke to John, he focused a lot on the word specialization when it comes to building and implementing AI tools towards fraud prevention and in particular scams. So my question to you, to lead on from that really, is what is the route towards this specialization? How do you become an expert?
When we think about specialization, I would say that we don't become specialists overnight. It takes years of model tuning, model scaling to really not understand the data that you have and is at your disposal. You need to kind of make sense of your data in a way that makes sense. And how do we scale that data? Getting the data at the right time to the right place so that the data turns into information that you can use. And having the models that are constantly tuning and doing all of that in real time. And when I look back at the RSA heritage, that's what the RSA heritage gave us, right? It gave us that winning mentality, that innovation journey that we were on, that infrastructure, that academy pipeline. And that's what specialization really means. It's not just about having a generic AI tool that you can apply to detect fraud. It's about how do you scale your models? How do you scale your infrastructure to factor in those data elements that you're going to get at new? And how do you do that at scale?
And it's nice to hear this from a data scientist lens, so thank you for that. Now, you mentioned there that you can't just use AI tools and just apply it. So I think that leads to my next question, if I may, that when it comes to things like scams we're discussing, authorized fraud, how do AI tools actually work? What's the nuts and bolts of how they work and how we should be using them?
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that, Debbie. And let me just kind of say, you asked me this question earlier offline, that it's scam same as authorized fraud. So let me just kind of spend a minute or so just demystifying it, like what does it really mean, right? So there are basically two categories of fraud that we are now seeing, right? What we call an authorized fraud and an unauthorized fraud. Predictive AI works remarkably well when it comes to detecting unauthorized fraud. An example of that is when a fraudster takes over your account and acts like you. And that's an account takeover scenario, and that's unauthorized fraud. When it comes to authorized fraud, scam is a great example because at the end of the day is the genuine customer doing the transaction, but the customer doesn't know that it's not really genuine. And that's the core difference between scams and unauthorized access takeover or account takeover. When it comes to tools, and before I go into how do we defend that, let me just tell you at the moment that it's a wild, wild west out there from a fraudster standpoint, right? I've seen an emergence of deep fakes. I've seen emergence of sophisticated social engineering scripts that fraudsters are using to bypass any security controls that you have. Recently, I came across a couple of sites in the dark web where they are selling voice cloning kits. And those voice cloning kits, Debbie, cost cheaper than yours and my Netflix subscription. So that's how, when I would talk about Wild Wild West, that's what I mean out there. There are lots of, and I don't mean to scare you by saying those things, because there's obviously lots of approaches we could utilize on our hand, namely the use of Gen AI and Agentic AI. And when we look at our fraud ecosystem, we think about layers of defense. And the layers of defense up until now worked extremely well because we made some heavy investments in protecting against the account takeover scenarios that I mentioned earlier. But scam just turns the whole thing upside down because of the genuine customers that's doing the transactions. Any layers of controls that were there to detect unauthorized access just won't benefit from that. So it requires a different level of thinking. Now, I still think that predictive AI will be the core at detecting scams. But what would be different is the use of signals within that. So we know that we have a more mature signals today available from our devices than we ever had before. We've seen an emergence of behavioral biometrics playing a key role in the way we detect scams. And what I meant by behavioral biometrics is that we'll be able to tell the way you are typing, the way you're moving your mouse, is it really you or is it someone acting on your behalf? But we can take that one step further and said, Debbie doesn't generally behave like this. Why is it behaving abnormally? An example here is, I don't know if you heard of a son in trouble scam. So son in trouble scam basically is, son calls a parent in a panic mode, saying, Dad, I've lost my phone, or Dad, I'm in some emergency, I need to transfer some funds. Those social engineering scripts are so sophisticated that the parent is convinced that he's talking to the son with the voice cloning kit that I was telling you about. Parent frantically opens up the mobile app, starts to do the transactions and frantically transfers the transaction or transact amount. And this is where the behavior biometrics could have a play in that, because what you've done in those scenarios as a parent is you frantically opened up your app, you frantically were typing, you made lots of mistakes when you were typing, when you added a new beneficiary, you were trying to very, very quickly go through your transaction journey so you can complete and transfer the money, because that emotional surface, attack surface that the fraud is playing on is around that insecurity that your son's in trouble. Using technologies like behavior biometrics, you can start to notice this subtle difference in your behavior. And I'll just add one more point to that, which is around the use of agentic AI. Because to me, agentic AI, it's not another wave of AI that we see from an evolution from generative AI into an agentic AI. For me, agentic AI takes the paradigm of software engineering, and in particular the way we do microservices. It's around, how do I combine this heuristic AI, this predictive AI, this generative AI into a cohesive ecosystem, so it gives me a better posture when it comes to defense in depth, so that when we think about the all-cause fraud specialism, we can have the right tools at the right time, and maybe we can apply that.
I mean, just listening to you, we're talking about really sophisticated tools, but also just very basic needs in people's lives and how it impacts them. And the scams change, the tools change, our lives change. So if we were to look into a crystal ball as we bring our interview to an end, very briefly, could you suggest how you see future strategies, especially when it comes to AI and fraud prevention, developing?
Yeah, so defense in depth would still have a role to play in this. There is no question in my mind that you can tackle the fraud in any other way, but to have a strong enough defense in that and a layered approach towards solving your fraud prevention. I do think that the likes of rules that we've used in the past are here to stay, but I do think that over time there's going to be less reliant on those rules and more reliant on AI to do the work. But there's going to be an evolutionary journey. It's not going to happen overnight. I do think that agentic AI and Gen AI will have a role to play. We talked about how Gen AI can prompt user, or we can nudge the user to come up to the right outcome or to get more accurate information about whether this is really scam or not. Agentic AI can be super useful when we think about those back office operations, the likes of policy management and case management. In policy management, for example, we can have agentic AI or generative AI working in a sense that there are lots of rules that I've written. Is there a way to make sense of those rules? And how do I keep those rules up to date so that yesterday's threat and today's threat, those parameters that I've used for my rules are constantly in sync so that I can do some preventative strategies that I could apply. But if you just zoom out for a minute outside of AI world, I still think that what we're going to see is a super sharp, accurate models that are based on surgical signals. Because right now, one of the challenges we are facing is that people are using, when a new signal is found, people are using that signal like a peanut butter. They're spreading it, everywhere across all the different journeys. So we're going to see a super surgical use of those signals, the right place at the right time, and doing it in real time. We're also going to see more advanced authenticators coming into play, the likes of passkeys making a journey here. But overall, if I had to summarize, I would say that the way I see the future of AI going when it comes to fraud prevention, it's having an AI hand in hand, augmenting the human outcomes, coming up with the better judgments together, so that fraud becomes more anomaly that we can really go after rather than an outcome or an expectation even.
And maybe building people's awareness more so that when they use these tools, perhaps they can be more powerful at the same time in the future. Yes. Yogesh, thank you. My goodness. It's quite a heartfelt topic to discuss because it impacts so many people, and it's lovely to have you in the studio. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Debbie. It's great to be here. Thanks.